Hello, welcome back for another episode of Mums on a Mission with me, your host, Julie Hatch. And today's episode I have called Listening in Our Noisy World. And I'm going to talk all about listening, how to listen, when to listen, who to listen to, that kind of stuff. And there are going to be four components to this episode about listening. First is about us listening to our kids. Second one is going to be our kids listening to us. The third one is going to be us listening to ourselves. And the fourth one is going to be our kids listening to themselves. And this really stems out from last week's episode with Chris Duffy Wenzel, who talked about her journey through cancer and surviving cancer and how she ultimately listened to herself. She listened to her inner voice. So that's the impetus behind this episode on listening. Okay, so first, listening to our kids. That is something that I talk about a fair amount because I feel really strongly that we should listen to our kids because they need to know that what they have to say is important. Even if we don't think it is important to them, it is important. And they need to feel, they get their sense of self-worth knowing that people are listening to them and paying attention to them. And that adds value to their lives. So listening to our kids benefits them greatly. And it benefits us too. We can learn a lot from our kids. If we open ourselves and our ears up to them, we can learn a lot from our kids. So when we listen to our kids, we want to connect with them. We want to connect with them at where they're at. We want to meet them at where they are at, both emotionally and mentally and physically. Physically, we want to literally meet them at their level. We want to be eye level with them. When they talk to us, we want to be at eye level. So that's a really good way to connect on the same physical level of them. But we also want to connect mentally and emotionally and sort of understand where they're coming from at that particular moment in time. My son, one of my sons, when he was about 5 years old, he used to grab me by the face like this and turn me so that I would listen to him. He would say, "Mom, listen to me," and he would turn me, and so we had to look eye to eye, and that's in a very gentle way, and that's a great way to start to connect with your child, is to just physically be there with them, be close to them. Don't be trying to listen to them from across the room while you're doing a million other things, but be present with them and be listening to them, looking at them and meeting them at their level, both physically and emotionally. Obviously, different age kids are at different emotional levels and need different ways of our listening to them. And we kind of just really need to shut up and listen because it's really easy as mothers, and I certainly know this, it's really easy to want to say something, either offer an opinion or advice or our thoughts. But I've learned that especially as kids get older, I try not to offer my advice unless they ask for it. And sometimes I found that if I offered too much advice or opinions or too much input thinking that I was being helpful, it kind of shut them down. It took away their expression of themselves when I would interject what I thought I should say. So it's just better to just be quiet, be quiet and listen. And then if they ask for some feedback or some comments from us, then we give it. Part of it also, you can take into account their element type. What is a good way to listen to them? For instance, the more yin type, the water and the metal type, who are a little bit quieter, not quite as active, might do well to just sit and have them talk in a quiet place or in front of doing a puzzle or whatever activity their element type likes. Usually we can just sit and be with them and listen to them talk, invite them to talk. And that works for earth type too. The more active types like the wood and the fire, who are more likely to be active or actively engaged in something, we can join them in their activity and invite them to talk, or if they have something they want to say, it's often good to be doing an activity with the more active kids, and that opens them up to talking more, and it's a more natural way to listen to them because they are in their natural element of doing something active. So consider their element type when you're figuring out when and how to listen to them. I also thought about birth order. I'm the third child of 4, and I hardly ever spoke. For one thing, I don't think my mother really was interested in what I had to say. But aside from that, my oldest sister was really loud, was always taking command and always hogging up all the attention and raising a ruckus, and she made sure she was heard. And then the rest of us, there was nothing left for anyone to hear. Nobody wanted to hear anybody else because my sister took it all up. So I think a lot of times firstborns and maybe secondborns command of a lot of attention and demand to be heard. And then that leaves the subsequent kids with not so much, less inclined to speak up because they figure, well, who's listening to me? So be aware of that with the birth order. Make sure that you give your younger kids, sort of like the earth kids who tend to blend in with a background or blend in with a crowd and not speak out. Just be aware that, of course, everybody has something to say, and we need to honor their element type and their birth order and encourage them to talk because we need to listen to them, and we need to know that whatever they have to say is important. They may think that it's not because they're the last in the line of a bunch of kids, but of course it's important. And along with being quiet and listening is, I like the analogy of tuning into their radio station. They have their own frequency that they are broadcasting from. And if we listen, we can hear what they are broadcasting. If we are listening to a different radio station, our own radio station, we don't pick up their frequency. If we're just involved in what we've got going on in our heads, we're not able to hear what they are saying. So turn off our radio station and tune into their radio station because they have their own frequency that they are vibrating at and that they are communicating from. So think about that, of just tuning into their radio station. So that's a little bit on listening to our kids. Again, I think that it's huge. It's also a way to model, which I will get into later, but it's a way to model listening to other people and respecting what other people have to say when we do that to them. So this leads into getting your kids to listen to you. And this is a big problem that I hear from parents. They get really frustrated because their kids don't listen to them, or they don't do what they're asked to do, which is a form of not listening to them. And I think that by obviously not listening, kind of turning away or making a point to let you know that they are not listening to you is a behavior. And as we all know, and as I have said, a behavior is simply a symptom of something going on deeper down inside of them. They are not intending to say, to heck with you, I'm not going to listen. It's just a symptom that there's something else going on, and the not listening is the symptom of whatever it is going on below, going on down deeper. So maybe they're hungry, or maybe they're tired, something simple like that, and they just don't have the patience to sit and listen, or whatever it may be. Or maybe they had something terrible happen at school, or maybe they're worried about something at school, or maybe they're just cogitating and thinking over and over about something that happened that's bothering them, worrying them, scaring them. Anything could be going on in their little heads that we just are not aware of unless they tell us about it. So that could be a reason why they seem to be not listening to you. So you want to get to, as you do with all behaviors, the root of why the behavior is happening. Why are they not listening to you? And like I said, it could be simply that they're tired or hungry, something going on in their head. And you want to also make sure that they hear what you're saying. You want to, once you say something, if they're paying attention and they hear you, you want to make sure that they verbalize back to you what they heard. Because sometimes what you say and what they hear are two different things. And so you just want to ask your child to verbalize back to you what it is that you just said to them. A lot of times, this has been proven, that a lot of times what you say and what is heard by the person who's listening to you are sometimes very, very different. And a lot of times it's just misunderstanding or not hearing correctly. So before you jump to conclusions that they're not listening to you or that they're doing something opposite or different from what you asked, make sure have them repeat back what they heard you say. And then you can know whether or not the message was received clearly or not. Was the radio frequency going back and forth clearly or not? But the bottom line really is to figure out why, if you can, why they're not listening. What's going on in their heads that's keeping them from listening to you? And maybe they have a hearing deficit. Who knows? It could be all kinds of reasons, but probably they're not being defiantly obstinate in not listening to you. And if they are, that's a statement that they are communicating something to you. There's something behind that. And so our job is to find out what's behind that behavior, whether it's inadvertent or on purpose. Also, sometimes kids don't listen or seem like they're listening because they are trying to exert some kind of control over their lives. There's certain things that kids have control over in their lives, and they don't have a whole lot. What they eat, whether or not they eat, is in their control, whether they open their mouth and eat or not. And going to the bathroom, pooping, they can hold on to that. If they want to have control over their lives, they can hang on to that. And constipation often happens in little kids because they are exerting their control over their life, and it's one little way that they can. And by not listening, this is another way that they can exert some kind of control. They can't be made to listen. You can't chain them to a chair and yell into their ears and make them listen. It's a little bit of control that they feel like they need to have in their life. So maybe just by not listening, that's something that makes them feel like they have some kind of control. So connection, both in listening to your child and having them listen to you, you want to connect again the same way, on their level, face to face, close physical contact, not from across the room or from another room. And again, you want to model this. So when they are listening to you, no, when you're listening to them, you model that you are listening to them. And likewise, when you want them to listen to you, they will model it back to you if you've modeled it correctly and modeled it consistently. Modeling is how kids learn so much about how to behave and how to be in the world. They don't know how to learn from any other way except for what's in front of them. And so the way that you behave is what they pick up and say, oh, this is the way to be. So modeling, active listening, and being present teaches them. Just by modeling is, you don't even have to tell them to do it. Just by what they see will help them to become good listeners to you and to others as well. A couple other things about helping kids to listen to you is try to do away with the word don't. Don't is, for one thing, is a negative kind of a thing, and it's just a more positive way. You have to work at it a little bit to change your mindset and how you're going to speak, but it's more positive and more effective to ask them please to do something, not don't do something. Don't do something is sometimes it's confusing to them because you're telling me not to do this, but what do you want me to do? So it's just easier and more straightforward to just say please do blah 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 and not the don't. Plus don't I don't know, it's just the energy and the whole vibe is just not as positive or not as pleasant as saying please do such and such. Try not to repeat yourself. One repetition of what you're asking of them is more than enough. If you find that you are repeating more than that, then it's not working. They're not listening to you, so you need to start over. You need to regroup and start over at a different time or from a different place or whatever. But repeating doesn't do anything except to frustrate you. And it makes them even tune you out even more and more. Going along with repetition is to, when you are communicating something to them, say less. The less that you say has more potency to it than the more that you say. When you say a lot, then the core message gets diluted in all of that a lotness. So saying blah, 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 blah is much less effective than saying blah. That one blah gets through to them, and that's what they hear. And especially with women, I've been told this, and I think that it's quite true, is that women, can say what they want to say in at least half the number of words and half the time that they do. We keep going, we try to say the same thing in a different way. We keep talking about it. And I know I do that, and I notice that. And it's particular to women. And I've heard many men say that women say much more than they need to. So probably our kids are feeling that too. They feel like we are saying more than we need to. If you do all those first things first and connect with them and make sure they're hearing you and use positive words, then you don't need to say much more than just what you want to say, and then leave it at that. Try to say yes a little more often. No, again, is just adding negative energy and mood. Just if you're always saying no, which again is really easy to, it seems like everything that they ask, you want to say no, no, no. So try to find a way to say either not right now, but yes, sometime in the future or whatever. Just try to find a way to say yes a little bit more often so they don't feel like they're always being shut down with a no, no, no. Again, it changes the energy and the mood of the conversation when you can say yes, and rather than knee jerk say no, think about it, and again, be present and find out when and how you can say yes, because I'm sure that there are opportunities that we can say yes. We just need to pay attention to it when we can say yes and what we're saying yes to. Again, make sure they've understood what you have said. That's key, because there are plenty of times when kids just they misunderstand, or they hear your message differently than you intended it to be. Again, a good reason to use fewer words, so things don't get confusing to them. Okay, so now number 3, we're getting into the deeper stuff now, is us listening to ourselves. And this is where I think about Chris's podcast last week, talking about, like I had said, her journey through a cancer diagnosis and treatment, along with finding her birth mother. She was adopted in a closed adoption agency where nobody had any information. Everything she tried, she could not get information from the adoption agency about her birth mother, which she needed for her health reasons. So she learned to go within and listen to her inner voice, which we all have. She heard her inner voice. She was on the yoga mat, and she heard her inner she heard a voice, which turned out to be her inner voice, loud and clear, telling her to don't rush into having surgery. And so from there, she started really listening to her inner voice. And we all can do that. It's challenging, especially when you're a really busy mother, because to be able to hear your inner voice, you have to shut out the rest of the world. You can't have everything blah, 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 blahing in your ear. And the world definitely is a noisy place these days. So you need to go somewhere quiet and where you have time and space to go within. And it's just, it's not a luxury. It's really something that is really beneficial to you, because we have many answers within us. We have wisdom, we have inner wisdom. We just need to open up our ears to hearing what that inner wisdom is. And you could maybe call it intuition, or you could call it your soul talking to you, but we do have an inner voice that really has the answers for our lives. And when we do this, we find that we have the answers that we need. Basically, we don't always have to be. It's very common for people to turn to other people or other professionals or outside of ourselves to find out what we should be doing. What is the answer? What is the right answer for us? And really, nobody in our lives knows what is right for us. Only we know what is right for us. And if you can practice this and sort of tune in every so often to your inner voice, or especially if you have you're just not quite sure what to do about something, if you can just sit and listen. You may think that it's a voice in your head, that you're crazy and you're hearing a voice in your head, but it's probably your inner voice talking to you. It's kind of it's sort of hard for me to describe, but you know it when you hear it. And all you have to do really is be in the right situation, meaning quiet and alone, to be receptive to it. Again, that's your inner radio frequency that you can listen to consciously. And And the value of finding your own answers within is invaluable because, like I say, somebody may think that they have the answers for you, but they don't. Only you have the answers for yourself. So this leads into your kids listening to themselves. This, I feel, this is a biggie, I think. If we can teach our kids to go within to find the answers that they want in their lives, if they're trying to figure out, make decisions in their lives, this is certainly for older kids, but it's a good practice to start so that when they become adults, they can do it. They don't have to turn to a psychiatrist necessarily or a medical doctor. Not that those are bad, that's absolutely fine. But if they can start by going within and saying, what is right for me? Not what is this person saying is right for me, but if they can be in touch with their inner soul, their inner nature, what is right for me, and they can get that answer, that puts them so far ahead of the game. It also puts them ahead of the game of alcohol and drug use, trying to find answers or comfort that way. There are numerous ways that we all turn outside to find the answers when really the answers are in us. So, yeah, so that's kind of it. Listening to our kids listening to us listening to ourselves. That's really the inner work that proves to be really very helpful. And if we can model that and teach or help your kids learn how to go within just by being quiet and listening to what they hear within. But I'm going to get more into that later because I'm going to be talking more about that later anyways. So I'm going to finish up with one way that I found really well recently. A friend told me about to shut out the whole world for an hour. And I mean shut out the whole world. And you can either listen within or you can figure out, I don't know, whatever you do when you're without sound and without light, which is a really novel experience. It's very hard to find. But this friend told me about, maybe you've heard about float tanks. And a float tank is a tank of water that you lie in. It's a big tank. It's more than enough room for a tall person to lie in with water. And the water has Epsom salts. They have put 850 pounds of Epsom salts into these tanks. So you are completely suspended in the water. You don't sink. You're just floating, which is why it's called the float tank, perfectly on top of the water. Or your backside is under the water and your front side is the top of the water, and the temperature of the water and the temperature of the air are the same. So it sort of feels like everything is all the same temperature. And you can, they give you earphones, I think partly to keep the water out of your ear, but also to keep the sounds out, any environmental sounds out. And you can have it totally pitch black, or you can have just a little bit of light on. You can have a little bit of meditative music playing, or you can be completely silent. But the experience of floating, just being suspended in the water, no pressure on anything, you can't feel any part of your body touching anything, and you can't hear anything, and you can't see anything, is a wild experience. And I suggest to everybody to just give it a try. It is just something that I have never experienced, and I don't think anybody else has experienced anything like this unless you've been to a float tank. Even going out to outer space where they have no gravity, they're still hooked onto something. This, you are just completely submerged and you are just free floating around in this water. So that's a great way to be able to go within and listen, because the rest of the world is shut out. So I suggest that for an hour long of just being quiet and silent and with nothing, not seeing anything either, no light. All right, so that is my spiel on listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. And I will see you next time. Listen, if you have watched this, if you like it, then give a thumbs up, a like, or follow me, or share it with somebody. I'd like to get some people involved and giving me feedback and letting me know maybe what else you'd like to hear about, and get other people listening too. All right, thank you. I'll see you next week.